everyone on this Friday night. Welcome to a Friday night edition of Flames Nation Live. What's going on? It's Pat Steinberg in our Sportsnet 960 studios on this Friday. Hopefully you're doing well. Hopefully you're staying safe. Hopefully you're getting through and persevering through a really rough 2020. It's crazy that we're almost into December. Crazy that we're almost into a spot where we're into the final month of the year, but it's true. Ryan is first in on the chat. Hello, Ryan. Hello, everybody else who's with us on Flames Nation Live on this Friday. Get your questions in. Get your texts in. And whatever you want to talk about, lots on the table from a Flame standpoint tonight. We can talk about prospects. We can talk about moves, lack of moves, whatever the case may be. We've got lots to go on. By the way, I see if I can get it on the screen here. I'm wearing the Hockey Diversity Alliance. That's the shirt that's being rocked today. Hopefully everybody's doing well, and thank you for being along with us. Carl's in. Matt is watching in Saskatoon. Hello from Calgary. And let's get right to our first topic. You can get your topics in on the chat right now, or your questions in, and we'll answer those as today's Flames Nation Live continues. But this is the first thing we're going to talk about, and that is what dropped today. They did the roundtable at flamesnation.ca. Ryan Pike led it, and a lot of talk about prospects with the rest of the contributors at flamesnation.ca, and just talked about the top 20 prospects as the rankings are in, and we've done the entire countdown. It's finally done. Juuso Välimäki was named as the number one prospect in the Flames organization, and I've got a bit of an issue with that. I don't agree with. No, I actually don't really have an issue with it at all. The only thing that because we've done some of these conversations at the radio station at Sportsnet 960, and the only thing that I've said is that it depends on what your definition is. Is Välimäki a prospect still? And I think by some definitions he is, because he's played less than 30 NHL games. And by other definitions, I don't know if he is, because we kind of just pencil him in as being on the NHL roster for next season. But I think that when it comes down to it, you can consider him a prospect, and I fully understand why he's the number one prospect at Flames Nation. So it begs the question, okay, Välimäki, I think, is pretty consensus as being the number one prospect in the organization. So then, if not Välimäki, who is the next best prospect in the organization? Who would be the de facto number two prospect? Where's our boy Kyle? Kyle's always in on the text and on the chat talking about Connor Zary. And if you're asking me, and Zary was named the number two prospect at Flames Nation, by the way, and if you're asking me if it's not Välimäki, I'm right there too. I think it probably comes down to, you're probably talking about Pelche, Zary, and Välimäki in some order. The reason why after Välimäki I go with Zary is because I think the upside is there. I think the ceiling is very, very high. And I also think that there's a lot of importance at the position he plays. The fact that Zary is a center, and the fact that he plays the most important forward position. In fact, you can make the argument. I'll make the argument. He plays the most important skating position, non-goaltending position. I think Zary would have to be that guy. So if Välimäki counts as a prospect, then yes, I'm totally on board that he's one. If you're going to go Välimäki's not a prospect and you have him penned in to the NHL roster for next season, then I go Zary is the number one prospect. I think Pelche is going to play. I think Pelche is going to be a very effective NHLer, but I don't know if his ceiling is as high as what you're going to get from Zary. I think Zary's ceiling of Calgary's forward prospects is the highest right now, and I think he's got the better opportunity to turn into a top six NHL forward, maybe a number one or a number two center, whereas Pelche seems like kind of a middle six guy, and a good middle six guy that you can play in all situations, a guy that you can play in penalty killing roles, you can play him in defensive roles, can give you some offense. I just feel like the offensive ceiling may be a little bit higher when you're talking about a guy like Zary. But I very much encourage you to go check out all of the top 20 countdown for the top Flames prospects. That's at flamesnation.ca right now. Great job by Pike and the rest of our contributors at flamesnation.ca for putting that together. We need off-season content. It's why it's harder to do Flames Nation Live 2 and 3 times a week. There's just not a whole lot going on right now. Things have slowed down a little bit in Flames world. So that's why the top 20 prospect countdown is really important in the offseason. We still don't know exactly when next season is going to start. Are we talking about January 1st? That feels a little more unlikely than it felt earlier. Like it felt like January 1st was a potential target even a few weeks ago, but all this news about the NHL and the NHLPA not being on the same page makes you believe that maybe January 1st isn't all that likely anymore. Maybe we're talking about January 15th, January 8th, January 25th, something like that. Sometime in January seems like more of a realistic target right now for when the NHL season starts. And the later it goes, the fewer games you can have. So probably need January 1. If it's going to be a 60-game schedule, you're probably looking at closer to 48 if it's a late January start. So lots to keep in mind in that regard. Who else is in on the chat right now? Jay's in. Hello, Jay. Dallas has got our first question. Says, any idea on Shillington? At this point, no. It remains very. That's kind of the lone remaining thing to take care of for the Flames and for their off season is signing Oliver Shillington. I know that Brad Treliving was very adamant that this guy's still part of the plan, and they still see him as part of this group going forward, but it remains very curious that he hasn't signed yet. It remains very curious that for a guy where on the surface it feels like that contract seems like it's pretty cut and dried and not a whole lot of negotiation needed, well, it's still not done and they still haven't signed it. So I wonder if this is a showdown's the wrong word, but I wonder if it's just a conversation about the Shillington camp really pushing hard for a one-way deal. The Flames camp maybe not quite there and looking for a two-way deal. Again, the differentiation between a one and a two-way deal on a guy like Shillington would be it's not really about waivers at all. He's going to need to clear waivers whether he's on a one or a two-way deal. So either way, his NHL experience, his professional experience means that you're going to be putting him on waivers if you want to send Shillington to the American Hockey League regardless. The difference would become the money that Shillington gets paid. He would have to get paid his NHL salary in the American League, as opposed to getting a two-way deal. A two-way deal means that you're paid something different in the AHL as opposed to the NHL one-way deal. You get that salary guaranteed regardless of what league you're playing in. Sam asks, what's your prediction on when next season could start? I've been saying all along, I've been saying that January 1 was my target, but that feels less and less likely as we move closer to the end of November. I'm kind of thinking more, I'd like to see January 8th, maybe a week later than initially thought. That still gives you a good chance to get close to 60 games in. But my prediction, I don't know if you read Larry Brooks' article in the New York Post earlier this week, but that it kind of suggests that maybe late January is what we're talking about. I'm going to say, just as my guess now, I've thought all along January 1st. I don't think that's realistic anymore. I'll say January 15th is the realistic target for next season. Here's an interesting one from Hank on the chat. Says, I wonder why the Flames haven't been able to develop goalies. Is it that they don't draft the right goalies or no opportunities to develop? I think there's a lot of things involved there. It's an interesting question. I think that the biggest reason why they haven't been able to find that guy, mainly because it's a crapshoot. Like goaltending is not a science. It is the opposite of a science. It's a crapshoot more often than not. It's voodoo. So I think the fact that it's so difficult to find a goalie in any organization is the number one reason. They got really lucky with Kiprusoff. They hit on Kiprusoff, and since that point, they haven't been able to find anybody else. Now, we'll see. I think Jacob Markstrom is going to be great, but in terms of drafted goalies and developed goalies, that's difficult. Like, Leland Irving, I thought was a reach when they took him in the first round and didn't really pan out. Tyler Parsons is still, I think, somebody that the organization has high hopes for. It just so happens that the first few years of him playing pro haven't gone so great. Health has been a big reason why, as the concussions have gotten in the way. So I still think there's hope for Tyler Parsons. Dustin Wolf looks as good a goaltending prospect the Flames have had in years, but until you see him at the pro level, you don't know. John Gillies was a really good college goaltender, has had some stints in pro. He's played some NHL games, but that hasn't necessarily worked out as the next guy. So I think more than anything else, Hank, it is it's definitely the fact that choosing goaltenders or finding goaltenders is difficult. As Kyle brings up, says picking McDonald over Demko was terrible. Yes, there have been some difficult decisions made when it comes to the actual draft. That goes down as a really bad decision. Mason McDonald bust. Thatcher Demko looks like he's going to be an NHL goalie, and they went 2 picks apart with McDonald going first to the Flames. That doesn't help. So there's a combination of things that goes into it. Josh asks, what do you think about how the COVID shutdown with Team Canada is going to affect our juniors? Well, if you're talking about Team Canada as a whole, I don't know. Like, we've never seen anything like this. The good news is this is the longest camp ever. And even when they return to practicing on December 6th, they're still going to have more time than regular for a selection camp. But the problem is, unlike regular years, good chunk of the players, the vast majority of the players haven't played games this year. So I don't know how it's going to affect him. It's completely bizarre. I don't know how this even happened to begin with, let alone how it's going to affect the team. As for how it affects Calgary's 2 players there in Pelche and Zary, I think it's more detrimental to Zary just because he hasn't played, but Pelche's only played like 10 games himself, so it's not like both guys have got a ton of junior action this year. So it's definitely going to be detrimental. There's no doubt about that. You can't convince me that it's a good thing, but how it's going to affect them long term, I really don't know, because we really haven't seen anything like this before. Here's a question from Russell, who asked this question in the chat. He also asked it on Twitter a little earlier today, so I'll bring it up for you visually. Russell asks, what's the status of Travis Hamonic and Noah Hanifin? Will they be staying or going? I asked this question on Facebook Messenger too, and I have indeed seen it. And Sam asked a similar question as well. Are you hearing anything about Hamonic and Stone? Let's start with Hanifin. I'm not hearing much on Noah Hanifin. I think that he's part of the plan here. I think he'll be with the team to start next season. I don't anticipate anything changing on the Noah Hanifin part. I think Hanifin is going to be part of this top 4 and is going to be an important part. And I think Hanifin is going to be a really important part of this blue line. If he can take a step this year, if Hanifin can take a sizable step this season, then I think that's huge for Calgary, because Mark Giordano did not have a great return to play. He's 37 years old now. I think you're looking for Hanifin to maybe start bridging that gap and maybe showing that he can play on a top pair or in a top pair role. But also with TJ Brodie gone and not having that versatility and not having that, I just think Noah Hanifin is going to be really important. Same thing. Valimaki's got the injury worries. Tanev's got the injury worries. Hanifin's proven he can be very durable. If he can take a big step, that's going to be a really important X factor for Calgary. As for the other guy that he mentions, and Sam brought it up as well, Travis Hamonic, I don't think that we're going to be seeing Hamonic back in a Flames jersey. Like, you can write off on that. Hamonic is not coming back to Calgary. I don't think there's any ambiguity there. Where Hamonic is going to end up, I don't know. I really don't. Like, the fact that he hasn't signed as of yet is curious. There has been interest in different spots. Different insiders have reported there's been interest, but he wants to stay closer to home. He was hoping, as we understand, that Winnipeg was going to be interested. Sounds like the Jets, though, aren't as interested in the hometown boys. So that doesn't sound like it's going to materialize, at least for the price that Hamonic is looking for. Toronto was interested, but they signed Brodie. And it sounds like Toronto was too far for Hamonic. Like, you kind of feel like Hamonic's limited himself. He wants to stay in Western Canada. There's only a few teams that you could consider being in Western Canada. One of them is Calgary, and Calgary's not bringing him back. So I don't know. This is a really strange situation. I think Hamonic's going to play next year. it is strange that he hasn't signed as of yet. That is really odd, but I don't think he'll be signing in Calgary. As for the other question that Sam brought up, and he asked about Michael Stone, but I think Stone has the opportunity to sign later on, especially once training camps are going on. Maybe he's a PTO candidate. I don't think it's crazy I didn't think it was crazy for the Flames to think about bringing him back, but with the Nesterov signing, I kind of think that probably means the end of the Stone Flames connection as well. I'm not as staunch on that in terms of my belief with Stone as I am with Hamonic. I really believe that Hamonic in Calgary, that's done. I would be absolutely floored if Hamonic were back in a Flames jersey next year. Good question from Russell. Here's one from Dallas on the chat. Pat, do you think the Flames are built to win now? The top six needs to be a little better and bigger, I think. I think that they are in a win now posture. I believe that they are trying to maximize a window right now, but do I believe that they are a Stanley Cup contender as they are built right now? I'm skeptical. I don't myself, because I think that their top forwards have shown us that too often they disappear in the playoffs, and their top forwards have shown us too often that they can't get the job done when it matters the most. Maybe moving Elias Lindholm to the middle can help mitigate some of that. We'll see. We'll see if they go down that road. But I was of the opinion that a big move was needed at forward this offseason. That big move hasn't come. I don't think it's going to come. I would be surprised at this point if it comes now. But do I think that they are built to win? Sure. I think they can be a competitive team. I think they're a playoff team. Are they a cup contender? Are they a deep playoff threat? My belief is, as they're built right now, no is that answer. What else we got going on our chat right now? Feel free on the chat on Facebook Live to get in. Let's take another swig of tea so I don't go dry. Another Dallas asked, Pat, that was the last question I asked. Sorry. Landon asks, the Canadian division looks like a lot of travel and a lot of time zone changes. Yes. However, what'll mitigate that in the Canadian division is the fact that they are going to go and be there for a little bit longer. It's not going to be in and out. You might play 2 games in the same building. Like you might go play 2 against the Maple Leafs back-to-back, then go to Montreal, play 2 there, Ottawa 2 there before you come back, and bam, there's a 6-game road trip. So I think maybe you're looking at 3 trips out east, all things considered, and even for the lower travel spots like Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Vancouver, you're probably still playing 2 games there. So that'll cut down on some of the travel, and it'll cut down on the big time zone changes as well. That's probably how they're going to mitigate this. Travis asked, Pat joined late if you talked about this, but do you see anything else happening with the Flames this offseason, or is this the team they're going into next year with? My feel is they probably, this is pretty much what you're talking about. Shillington still needs to get signed, maybe a fringe signing or a depth signing specifically with a right side defenseman, but I would be surprised now as we're pretty close. Even though we don't know when it's going to be exactly, we're still like a month and a half, 2 months away at most from when a season would start. We're probably a month and a half or a month away from when a training camp would start. It's November 27th. So yeah, you're probably talking about a month away from the start of training camps, all things considered. Even knowing the PA and the NHL haven't agreed on things, you're probably looking at sometime in about a month. So my guess, pretty close to what this roster is going to look like when it's all said and done. Jason asks about a depth guy like Ben Hutton. That's the type of player that I could see the Flames still signing in terms of a depth defenseman. That's the type of player I can see. Another question from Hank, going back to the blue line. Could you see Hanifin and Anderson being the top pair at the end of the season with Gio on the second pairing? Is this the year where Gio moves to the second pair? I'm not ready to say that for a few reasons. I don't know if Gio does regress a little bit, or if he is a guy that, is clearly not the number 1 guy anymore this season. I think you're looking at kind of less of a situation where there's a top pairing and more of a situation where there's 2 top pairings or a 1A, 1B situation. And in that case, yeah, I could see Hanifin and Anderson being that. or maybe it's Gio and Anderson, Hanifin and Tanev, but something like that where you distribute the minutes evenly as opposed to Gio clearly being the number one guy. So we'll see. I'm not ready to say that Gio's done, though. I'm not ready to say this is the year where he's not their clear number one defenseman. I know that the return to play, he was not great, but I still think Gio is the type of guy where he's defied the odds so many times until it's clear he's not that guy anymore. I'm not ready to say he will be. Interesting question from Carl. We talked about this before. I wrote about this, or I wrote about him rather. But Carl asked, does Sam Bennett get traded before the end of this season with the Seattle expansion draft coming up? I think there is a chance that at some point between now and July that Bennett is traded. Whether it's in season or not, I don't know. A lot of what will determine that is how good Bennett plays during the regular season. Can Sam be closer to the playoff Bennett we saw, or is it more of the same with him being inconsistent and generally ineffective a lot of the time in the regular season? That will determine it. Could I see it happening in season? Sure, depending on how Josh Levo and Dylan Dubé and some of the other players that you're hoping for more from do. But I think there is a chance that Bennett is somewhere else to start next season anyway. Sam asking about 60 or 48 games. I think that we're probably talking about, at this point, 60 might be a little unrealistic only because January 1st seems a little unrealistic. So we'll see if it's 60 or 48. I'm hoping it's 60, but it kind of feels like 40 is the way they're going at this point, or the target they're looking at. Travis asks, if you were to predict the top two lines going into next season, how would they look? Well, I'll give you two answers. I'll give you my prediction, and I'll give you what I think should be the case. My prediction is that the top two lines will be identical to start next season. That is my prediction, that it will be Lindholm and Gaudreau flanking Monahan with a 3M line of Backlund, Mangiapane, and Tkachuk together. That is my prediction. What I think should happen is different. I believe the top two lines should look more like Lindholm between Tkachuk and Mangiapane, so Lindholm down the middle, and then you've got Monahan with Gaudreau and Dubé, or Monahan and Gaudreau with Levo. That's the way I think they should go. I don't necessarily think that's the way they are going to go. So I've got two answers for you, Travis. I wish so. My prediction is that they're going to go identical to the way they finished. What I would do is different, and I would have Lindholm at center. And finally, from Zach, who asks, who's going to have a bigger impact on their new team, Brodie with Toronto or Tanev with the Flames? I believe that answer is Brodie with the Maple Leafs. If you're asking me, I think Brodie is the better all-round defenseman. I think he makes more of an impact on a team than Tanev does. That's not me saying that Tanev is a bad player, because I think Tanev can still play in a top four. I still think he's a top two pairing right side defenseman, but I just think Brodie is the superior defenseman, not by a massive margin, but personally, I think Brodie's more versatile. I think he skates better. He can play in more situations. He's got more of an offensive upside, better skater. So I think that Brodie is the better all-around player. He also has the ability to play up and down the lineup on the 3D pairings, and can play both the left and the right side. And he's durable. That's the one area that you're really worried about when it comes to Tanev, is the fact that he has never played more than 70, 72 games in a season. So you can basically, and that's a 10-year NHL career, you can basically pen in the fact he's going to miss a chunk of time every year. Brodie a little bit more durable. So yeah, I think that Brodie will have the bigger impact. That's not to say that I think Tanev will be bad. I think Tanev will be very good here when he's healthy. I think the Flames blue line has only personally taken a slight step back. I don't think they're massively worse. They're less deep, but I still think they're a pretty decent blue line for next year. But yeah, I think Brodie will have more of an impact in Toronto. And Jason asks, Alex Killorn would be a great pickup. Elliot Friedman on our morning show at Sportsnet 960 today said that Killorn probably going to be the guy that goes in Tampa Bay. It's just the fact that the Flames have no cap space. They've only got $1 million, if give or take at this point. 4.45 for Killorn. I don't know how the Flames fit that in, especially if they're going to help the Lightning out. Like if you're taking Killorn off the Lightning's hands, Tampa's hoping that you're taking all of that 4.45 for the next 3 years. I just don't know how Calgary fits that in. That I think Killorn would be a great fit for a lot of players. I just don't know if the Flames or a lot. I think Killorn would be a great fit for a lot of teams. I just don't know if the Flames can fit it in on their salary cap. Great stuff on our chat today. Really enjoyed interacting. Hey, sometimes there's just not a ton of topics, and you need to just take the questions on the chat. So we did today. We'll do this again next week. And then as we move closer and closer to hockey season, as Flames Nation Live will be more frequent, but at least once a week. We'll do at least one next week. You can always catch us. Usually we'll do it around 6 o'clock on just as soon as you're home from work or as soon as you're done working. You can always tune in on Facebook Live. Tune into the big show on Sportsnet 960 The Fan every weekday from 1 until 6 o'clock. Elliot Friedman joins the program on Monday at 3 o'clock. Check out all the prospects rundowns on flamesnation.ca. And I've got a cool, I don't know if it's a cool idea, if you'll think it's a cool idea, but I've got something dropping. I think I'll drop it on Monday about the future of retired jerseys for the Calgary Flames. We can maybe talk about that next week on Flames Nation Live as well. Check us out on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. Give me a follow on Instagram, on Twitter if you like as well. We will talk to you next week. Be safe. Be well. Talk to you next week. Have a great weekend. It's been another edition of Flames Nation Live. My name is Pat Steinberg. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Thank you so much for stopping by.